Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to USDTL's June 2023 Toxtime titled Xylazine, an Adulterant Story. Presenting today is going to be our very own Andre Sukta. He is our Research and Development Projects Manager here at USDTL. Some of Andre's credentials include receiving his Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from Benedictine University. He received his master's in forensic science from the University of Illinois, Chicago. Andre has also co-authored several peer-reviewed research articles, including papers in the Journal of Analytical Toxicology and Forensic Science International. Andre began his career in forensic toxicology and the performance testing of racehorses. Since joining USDTL in 2013, Andre has taken on many leadership roles, including currently serving as a director for the Society of Forensic Toxicologists. He is also a member and past chairperson in the Alcohol, Drug, and Impairment Division of the National Safety Council. So without further ado, I present to you Andre Sukta, everyone.
Hello, welcome to USDTL's Toxtime. Today's Toxtime is about Xylazine, an adulterant story. I'm Andre Sukta. I am the R&D Projects Manager. Here at USDTL, our goal is to make a difference, and so our vision is to protect and enrich lives, and our mission is to use the best science available and provide cutting-edge tools for the analysis and evaluation of exposure to ethanol, substances of abuse, and toxins. We do this by using our core values of leadership, collaboration, integrity, innovation, true urgency, and quality. My disclosures are that I am a paid employee of United States Drug Testing Laboratories, which is a commercial provider of forensic toxicology testing services. Any mention of brand names are for reference only and are not an endorsement of that particular brand. Information provided today is for educational purposes, and any opinion that is given is that of myself and not as a representative of USDTL or any other organization that I am affiliated with. So first off, we should talk about what is adulteration. This is a term that has been increasingly become popular, and to adulterate means to corrupt, debase, or to make impure by the addition of foreign or inferior substance or element. So when they try to make something for sale, they're replacing a more valuable piece with a less valuable or something that's inert. And this has been going on for a very long time. You really can go back and look at how alcohol and alcohol proof started, and this comes from the concept that people would add water to their alcohol or their rum. This was typically done through the Navy. In order to prove that it was pure, they would dose it with gunpowder, and if it lit, that would show that there was less water in it, and so that was how you proved that it was good quality. And that's where the term proof comes from. And so people have been adulterating things for a long time. You'll find this a lot in the food industry. People will put something else into a product to try to make it go longer or farther or make it cheaper. Instead of adding the quality ingredient, they're using a less cheap or an inferior product as a substitute. So cutting agents or adulterants in the drug supply have been a concern. And this has started out for many, many years. As I stated, that the proofing of alcohol goes back to like the 18th century. So this isn't a new concept, but every few years it comes out with some new drug that gets put into the drug supply that is out there. And so currently xylazine, and that's why we're all here today. But back in the 2000s, when I started my career, I was doing horse race testing. And at that time, cocaine was coming through the Chicagoland area, and it was being cut with levamisole. Levamisole is a veterinary drug, and it's used to deworm cattle, pigs, and sheep. And so if you take a large quantity of this deworming, you can end up with rotting soft tissue areas. So that usually lends itself to noses, ears, cheeks. But in 2010, about 80% of the cocaine supply had levamisole in it. And as I said, I did horse race testing, and so we were familiar with it because we would test for it. You know, why would somebody put levamisole in the cocaine supply? It's a dewormer. This doesn't make a lot of sense, but it still exists in the cocaine supply to this day. And in fact, in Indiana, in 2022, Indiana reported the following cutting agents in the supply that they would see. And this was diphenhydramine, xylazine, quinidine, lidocaine, acetaminophen, caffeine, levamisole, and gabapentin. Now, some of those are over-the-counter products, like diphenhydramine is Benadryl. Lidocaine is an anesthesia or can be used in topical ointments. Acetaminophen is simply aspirin. Caffeine, which we're all very familiar with and having our morning cup of coffee. And then levamisole and gabapentin. Gabapentin, of course, can be abused. It's also a legal substance that you can get with a prescription. It's very common in sort of the veterinary world. It's commonly prescribed for use in smaller animals like your pets, dogs, cats, when they have some pain. So sometimes it gets diverted from the veterinary use and then gets into the human supply. So when we talk about xylazine, we kind of need to know what it is first and foremost. So it has a couple of different trade names. So xylazine is more of the chemical name, and it is a veterinary use only compound. It is an essential tool used by veterinarians who work on livestock. So I want to make sure that people understand that it is something that the veterinarians do need and want. Administered via IV or intravenously. It can also be administered intramuscularly. It's an anesthesia that in these larger cattle, horses, can last about an hour. So it has a good time limit. And so they'll frequently use it in conjunction with ketamine. And it's commonly used when they need to treat the animal for tetanus. It provides really nice sedation and anesthetic effects. It also helps the animal relax. And then in cats, it can be used as an emetic or something that allows them to be able to throw up something if they have something in their system. So I do want to point out that this has been around for a little bit, and clinical trials were initially created for this in humans. However, they were terminated during that phase due to severe hypertension and central nervous system, such as the significant depressant effects that it has. So xylazine has many street names: trank dope when it's cut with heroin, or sleep cut. And so right now what we're seeing in the market is that it's being used as an adulterant, and it's not currently something that is being sought out by itself. However, I do want to point out that it does seem that in some of the initial locations where it came from in Puerto Rico, there was definitely some xylazine usage, and that was coming as a more pure compound. So drugs such as cocaine, fentanyl, and heroin are often adulterated to increase the bulk size or to modify effects of other drugs. So xylazine is commonly used in adulterant mixed with heroin and cocaine, which is known as a speedball. And it's used for purposes, for illicit purposes, such as attempted sexual assaults, accidental or intentional poisonings, and or drug abuse. So routes of administration can include smoking, snorting, swallowing, inhaling, or injecting. And so they're used with this, and it's commonly found with the cocaine, heroin, fentanyl. Repeated xylazine contaminated products can cause skin ulcers and abscesses. Some of the clinical effects of xylazine: it causes central nervous system depression. It is a profound sedative, so it has profound sedation effects, and that is really the biggest problem with xylazine. It does affect a couple of different receptors in the brain and the body. Time to activity from taking it is about 1 to 2 minutes, and the duration of the drug can cause effects up to 4 hours. Typically, xylazine gets added to fentanyl to prolong the fentanyl effects. So the New York Times recently interviewed a couple of people that are using xylazine enhanced fentanyl. And the story that they provided in this New York Times article was pretty interesting and it was helpful to be a little eye-opening to kind of understand what is going on in the population that we're trying to serve with this. And so what one person noted was that at the injection sites where she was using the fentanyl, she was used to getting bruises from the injections. When she was using this xylazine laced fentanyl, it started to cause these abscesses, and it started to harden into a almost like an armor of blackened tissues, what was being noted here. They attempted to get it from a different source and was still having the same issues. This picture on the front article of the New York Times paper, this is a picture of a Brooke Peter, and so she unfortunately had to have her leg amputated. She was injecting into her leg, and now she was going and injecting into her arm, and she's having the same difficulties of abscesses and other issues, and she's hoping that they're not going to have to take her arm. So this is a pretty terrifying thing for many of the people that end up using the xylazine laced fentanyl, and they don't know it. And this is part of the struggle, is they think they're taking what they're used to, and now it's changed. So xylazine, the DEA has put out some of their identifications, and when they started to see xylazine, started to be really looked for in 2020 was the earliest that it was looked for. And so you can see in different areas of the country, the difference between the 2020 number of reported laboratory identifications versus 2021. And we're seeing the largest increase in the South and the West. The Northeast has also seen some pretty significant increases as well. A little bit slower on the uptake is the Midwest, and that's not too big of a surprise. The Midwest tends to be sort of the last area that these drugs cycle through. They come in, they go to the coasts, and then filter their way into the Midwest, and then kind of that's sort of the lifespan of most abuse drugs. And then number of overdoses has increased significantly in all areas over those couple of years. I mean, greater than 100%. So this is part of the reason why it is such a concern. The challenge is that the xylazine is being found, while predominantly being found with fentanyl, it's also being found with methamphetamine, cocaine, morphine, metronidazine, and quinine. And so when you're taking it with these other central nervous system depressants like alcohol or benzos, it really does increase the risk of a life-threatening overdose. The problem is that Narcan, which is what has been used to reverse overdose effects, is not effective. There is no approved antidote for xylazine in humans. And so the mainstay of the treatment remains supportive. So you still use Narcan for the opioid effects. There's some mixed reports in the naloxone reversing symptoms of overdose, but really what's happening is they're reversing the fentanyl, the heroin, the other opioid effects. And so they're not removing that significant sedative effect that xylazine is providing. And so when you have this co-drug in there, if somebody is going through an overdose and they're given Narcan, you still need to be watching them and be able to be ready to treat them, because they're going to have severely depressed central nervous systems. They're going to have a hard time breathing. They're going to have a low pulse rate, low blood pressure, and at any moment they might need life-saving critical support. And so we need to be aware of that. There is a drug that's used in the veterinary world, because remember, I did veterinary testing for many years, and it's called yohimbine. And so they'll use that as a antagonist to help reverse the sedative effects of xylazine in horses. However, it's mostly like in horses and dogs and elephants, it's not approved for human use. So even though I've noted it here, it's just not effective that we've seen in human use, but there hasn't been any significant trials to really prove that. So xylazine continues to be a challenge for testing laboratories across the country. It's new. There's been a large rash of new drugs that have been coming out. And so it's taken a lot of our efforts to decide where we need to put our priorities to what to test the next thing, right? But for us at USDTL, we try to help the most vulnerable population, which is our newborns. And so recently, there's been a couple of articles. This one's from the Journal of Pediatrics, and they noted that there was some opioid ingestions that included xylazine, and these were in young children. So there was 3 cases that came out of this particular study where the xylazine was in the opioid mix that was available to them to be able to ingest. And so we have to all remember that children are not adults. We can't treat children the same way that we can treat adults. The dosages need to be significantly different. Children react differently to the same drug that an adult would react to. And this is really showing the same issues here. And so these kids experienced things like cardiac arrest. They needed mechanical ventilation, so they had to be put on a machine that was going to breathe for them. And so for us, it's important to note what's going on with the children because that's one of the areas that we are very passionate about. So what's next? So it seems like everything is coming full circle in my career is now that the veterinary drugs are what's coming up as the new substances of abuse. So the next one that's coming out, this was put out in March of this year, so just a couple of months ago by the Center for Forensic Science Research and Education. They went back and were trying to find what other common adulterants they're starting to see in their casework. And so these are now noting that they're starting to see some increases in this phenylbutazone. And so phenylbutazone, again, very popular in the horse race industry. It's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, commonly called an NSAID. So it was introduced in the 1950s. It has analgesic and anti-inflammatory properties. After its introduction, now interesting, this was originally introduced for human use. And so they noted many side effects, and these side effects were causing challenges with patients for both short-term use and long-term use. So really, it quickly became discontinued from human use after there were reports of death associated with it. It does continue to be used in the veterinary medicine world, specifically for treating lameness, pain, and inflammation in horses, as I noted. And I can tell you that in Illinois, which is where we're based out of, and that's where I did the drug testing in racehorses, it's a 24-hour ban for the use of phenylbutazone. So they're not allowed to give any dosage for 24 hours prior to the race. We did a survey while I worked there between 2004 and 2009, and this abuse of phenylbutazone was the most frequently reported positive result that we had at that time. Now that data could have changed over the years since I last worked there, but it's probably still the same. Abuse of any kind of pain medication is the most common in that realm. So we said phenylbutazone might be next, but maybe not just phenylbutazone. We also have this thing called lidocaines and other canes. So we know lidocaine has been abused for a long time, especially in the cocaine market, more so than anything else. And the reason for that is it gives a numbing tingle. And so if you remember some of the older TV shows and or movies where there's, the cops do a drug bust scene, right? They then stick a pinky or a knife and then they tap it to their lips. What they're trying to feel for is that numbing sensation that cocaine provides, and that's what lidocaine does. So it tricks you into thinking that you have a more pure supply. So again, adulterated cocaine in that particular case. But what we're now seeing is that there's these other canes that are starting to be put into the supply, benzocaine and procaine. And it's really to do the same thing. It's to take that cocaine supply, adulterate it with a inferior product that can allow it to go farther, and that way they can make more money and sell more, without letting the end user really know what's going on, and or try to pull the wool over the end user's eyes. So we're seeing increases in this among the by looking at the International Toxic Adulterants database. The lidocaine positivity is starting to increase in its percentage over time in these different countries. So it's really interesting for me to really started my career in the horse race world, into the veterinary testing world, and now to come back through, and a few years in, 10, 20 years later, I'm starting to hear all these veterinary drugs come into the human drug world now, really. And it's just like, I feel, and I'm like, yes, I've been testing for that for 20 years. What do we need to look at? How do we need to adjust the methodology that I'm familiar with from 20 years ago to try to get it live and ready for the next thing? So we do keep an eye on it. There is a challenge with any new drugs that come out, even whether they're adulterants or just purely substances that are being abused. There's a life cycle to a lot of them that tends to be pretty short. The ones that are more likely to stick around are the ones that we're trying to do a better job of chasing after, so that we can help to satisfy the needs of the clients that we're servicing. So with that, I'd like to say thank you all for attending.
Subscribe to our channel to see more videos like this.